Order. Excuse me 1 second, please. That's perfect timing.
It always happens.
I have bronchitis. I'll be coughing the whole time I'm talking. We
Oh,
understand.
Lord.
If the board members could turn on your cameras for us, please, those who can. Thank y'all so much.
Okay, let's begin. I'd like to call this meeting to order and announce that it is 10:04 a.m. on Friday, September 1st. I'd like to ask everybody to mute their microphones and just turn them on when you speak. I'd also like to remind you to announce your name
Excuse me 1 second.
when you speak so that your names can be recorded. Perfect timing. And item B on the agenda is the roll call and certification of quorum. And I'll call on Anna Clark to do the roll call. Miss Anna?
Yes, sir. Cynthia Rothermel,
Present.
Laura Donahue,
Present.
Christina Stevens,
Present.
Dr. Valerie Devaney,
Present.
Herbie Gagne,
Present.
Dr. Aaron Schultz,
Present.
and Amber Green.
I'm present.
We have a quorum, sir.
Wonderful. Miss Anna, if you wouldn't mind, perhaps you could call on the members in the same order that you called the roll, and perhaps everyone, because we have some new members on the committee, it would be good to put a name with the face and what you do for the committee. So, Miss Anna?
Of course. Ms. Rothermel,
My name is Cindy Rothermel. I'm the director of a breed-specific rescue for Texas.
thank you very much. Ms. Donahue,
Hi, Laura Donahue. I'm the Senior Director for Legislation and Advocacy at Best Friends Animal Society.
thank you. Christina Stevens,
I'm Christina Stevens. I am the president of the National Antelope Mountain Dog Association.
Dr. Valerie Devaney,
Hi, I'm a relief veterinarian and a dog fancier. I raise Dalmatians and Border Terriers.
Kirby Gagne. I'm sorry. Yes, Kirby Gagne.
My name is Vanessa Gagne, and I'm a public member.
Dr. Aaron Schultz,
Hi, I'm Erin Schultz, and I'm a veterinarian in North Texas.
and Ms. Green.
I am animal control officer, and I have been for 13 years.
Thank y'all so much.
Thank you. So, my name is Joseph Levine, and I am a breeder in North Texas and have been involved with the TDLR and the Licensed Breeder Advisory Committee since 2015. So item C on the agenda is the General Counsel training, and I would like to call on Laura Pfefferly, who is the Assistant General Counsel, to bring the discussion on Open Meeting Act, all the information, and the Public Information Act and the Administrative Procedure Act. Ms. Pfefferly?
Yes, my name is Laura Pepperly, and I am an assistant general counsel in the general counsel's office. And the first thing we have on the agenda to do here is the open government training. And so I'm going to put that on the screen. You've all probably had some training in this, but this is a refresher that we need to do periodically. So you may have heard it before, but you'll be hearing it again. I'll try to move along through it. And so let me share that with you. Okay. The the law on open meetings and the Administrative Procedure Act and Public Information Act all apply to what you do as an advisory board, and so we're going to cover all three of those. The most important for your operations is the Open Meetings Act, because the Open Meetings Act requires you as a board to meet in a public meeting, and for the public to have notice of the meeting so that the public can participate and witness your deliberations and your decisions. The only time you actually can meet and make decisions as a group and a quorum is in an open meeting, a public open meeting that's been noticed, as you're in today. And as you know, quorum is a majority of the members. We have a quorum today. You cannot.
Hey, it's me, your skin. This acne craves a powerful cleanse. New CeraVe Acne Wash treats with max strength benzoyl peroxide. CeraVe with 3 essential ceramides doesn't disrupt my barrier. We can treat and finally feel comfortable. New CeraVe Acne Wash.
You do have work groups, and those are always less than a quorum so that you can meet and discuss public business, but you cannot do it as a quorum. So a deliberation or discussion is when you're talking about the public business, and even if you're just attending a speech where one person is talking to all of you and you're not talking back, that's still considered, a deliberation or a discussion because you're a quorum and you're present together. And the meeting is, you're either by video as we are now or in person, but a quorum is present, and you're discussing the business that you have control over as a board. And the notice is basically the agenda. We publish the agenda, and that's the notice of the meeting, and it gives an agenda. And the reason we have to stick to the agenda is that if we talk about things that aren't on the agenda, then the public hasn't obviously had notice of those. So we only can talk about things that the public has had notice of so that they can attend to hear those items discussed. And this is saying, can members ever meet in an informal setting without violating the Open Meetings Act? And you can discuss, other things outside of board business, but you're getting into dangerous territory if you talk about any kind of board business and a quorum is present, even if you're at an event where say a breeders type of conference or something. You really we don't dissuade you from attending things like that, but you really need to not be talking about board business there. So the whole entire quorum doesn't have to be present at the same time either. If you meet in a work group of say 3 members, and then that work group gets on a conference call or emails, forwards an email or something about it to a few more members, and a quorum winds up being involved or talking about that business, then you've gotten into a quorum even though you're not all in the same place at the same time. It's the deliberation or discussion that counts, and that's where you need to be careful not to rope in too many members, or you're going to wind up in a quorum, and then that is supposed to be done in a public meeting. So, and that's called the walking quorum. 1 or 2 members communicate to 1 or 2 more, and they communicate to 1 or 2 more, and pretty soon you've got a quorum. Here's an example. Two members talking to each other, and then they forward the discussion on, and they've gotten into the numbers where there's a quorum involved in that discussion, and so that's the walking quorum. And let's see here. And these are just examples of how that can happen. We're all pretty familiar with all the ways humans communicate now, so any way you communicate, you could be having a discussion and you could turn into a walking quorum. So this says don't, meet in small groups to talk about board business. Well, that's what, the work groups do, but that discussion has to be limited to that work group, and it can't be passed on to the rest of the members until you're in a public meeting. And then otherwise, you don't want to be talking about board business on social media and other venues like that, because other members can see that and respond. And so it's so easy to fall into getting a quorum involved that it's better not to do it. Just to be really careful and not talk about board business unless you're in an actual noticed public meeting. That's the safest way to handle it. Other than your work group discussions, you can be very frank and free to speak in work groups, but that has to stay within that work group. And again, you can only cover what's on the agenda. The public is allowed to comment at the meetings, and the public is not really restrained to the items on the agenda, but if they comment, you can't start a discussion about some subject that is not on the agenda. All you can do is add that to the agenda for the next meeting, so that the public has noticed that you're going to talk about that particular item. If you get a comment and you need to ask a question or two to clarify exactly what the subject is that the person wants to discuss so that you can put it on the agenda, that's fine. But you can't just get into a substantive discussion about things that are not on the agenda. And so basically, limiting your discussions and being aware of how many people are present. That's always a good idea. I mean, if you, we used to meet in person with the board meetings, and people would hang around after the meeting and keep talking about business, and it's like, you really can't. You have to be really careful. It's so easy to fall into that. It's probably a little harder on these video calls, because once the meeting's over, it all turns off. But you don't want to get into a conference call or something after the meeting either. And there are punishments for violating the Open Meetings Act, but the main problem for all of us would be that anything you decide or do as a when you're acting unlawfully, basically outside of an open meeting, would be voidable. Criminal penalties are not too common. We hear every now and then about a case of someone violating the law, and so there, it'll get in the news, but the criminal penalties aren't quite as frequent, but there can be a lot of consequences that may not be criminal but are serious, as far as things that you've done, official acts that are voided. So if you stick to less than a quorum, if you stick to when you are in a quorum and you're in a public meeting, sticking to the agenda, that's pretty much the main things you need to do. But it's good to know how you can mess up, because it is very easy to do as well. There are lots and lots of resources. If you suddenly find yourself thinking, oh my gosh, did I just violate the Open Meetings Act? You can always call us and ask. You can, there's, like I say, there's lots of resources. You need to be aware beforehand, but if you think you've slipped up and you're worried, just let us know and we can guide you through it. But just, being careful and sort of watching what you do and say and where you do and say it is the main thing to take away from that. And so we will move on to the Administrative Procedure Act. Now, this is basically tells the agency how to do its business. And so all the agencies in Texas basically follow the Texas Administrative Procedure Act. Some have a lot more rulemaking than others. But that act covers the rulemaking process, which of course you're involved in because you advise the agency about the rules. And so a lot of the things we do, we're really not trying to torture you. We're just trying to comply with the Administrative Procedure Act, which we are bound to do. So the main business that you all discuss and handle is what's going to go into the rules and how we implement new laws in the rules. So that is your main job, and so it falls within the APA rulemaking process. So when we change a rule, there are various ways that comes up. Today we're going to be talking about changes that came from a legislative change, which the legislature changes a statute and then we need to implement that. May or may not have to make rules. This time we do have to make rules. But we get a lot of input on most of our rules. It could come from a lot of sources, and so when we do a rulemaking, we don't just limit it to one source. Typically, we'll try to cover any changes that have been suggested or brought up or recommended before that rulemaking and try to implement as many as we can at once. One way the rulemaking process can be initiated is if a person asks for a rule change, and these come more frequently in some programs than others, but as long as you qualify, which it's not too difficult to qualify to be a person who can petition, you can petition for any kind of rule change you'd like to have made. And that there's a process for answering that, and I won't get into that, but there are lots of ways to give us ideas for rulemaking. This is the process, and this is what the Administrative Procedure Act lays out. This is how it happens here, and right now we're in that first blue box, which is the first advisory board meeting. So the rule idea and drafting the first box, that is what followed when the legislature changed the statute this session. And so then we start getting a draft rule together, and the governor's office has to approve it to go forward. And so we have finished those steps. And so now at this board meeting, we look at the rule, the draft rule, and in this meeting, the most important thing to do is to decide to recommend the rule for publication, and that means with changes or without, but we'll get into that when we talk about the rule. So we're kind of early in the process, but I can tell you that that last box that says effective date of rules, for these rules, it's January 1st of 2024. So we've got to get through all those other boxes by then. And so these rules are speeding through as government time goes. And so our goal is that they need to be effective for January 1st. And to do that, we have got to get them proposed, go through the comment period, and address the comments and recommend to the commission to adopt them. And then the commission has to meet to formally adopt them. And so then, they're published and formally adopted, and then they can become effective for January 1st. Can't be effective until they're actually adopted by the commission. You have this chart in your materials too. And the rule review was done like a year and a half, 2 years ago, just before I took on this program. And that's when the whole set of rules is proposed for review. And basically the recommendation either is to readopt the whole set as is, or repeal them. And that doesn't happen unless a program goes away or is discontinued. Usually they are readopted as they are, but we get public comments because they do have to go through a public comment period, even though we're not recommending any changes in them. We're just putting them up for review. So even if we get comments, there is no change to be made. So those comments usually are not addressed at all until the next actual regular rulemaking, and that's when they'd be addressed. And we do have one or two from previous rule review that that'll be addressed in the rulemaking. Again, lots of resources. You can always ask us. There's lots out there. You don't really need to learn the Administrative Procedure Act in detail, but it's always good to know what's coming next, and that's where that act comes in, is it tells you the whole rulemaking process and what we have to do in it. And the Public Information Act, this is not something that you on a day-to-day basis are going to be necessarily involved in, but you have to understand that all your materials and the packet you receive, all the documents that a government has, and you as agents basically of this agency, your documents are subject to open records requests. The Public Information Act. We owe it to the taxpayers to be transparent, and that includes anything we do related to public business. So basically all documents and records, whatever they are, recordings, photographs, anything, are subject to the Public Information Act, that the public has a right to see them. So there are some exceptions. If we have a document that has a person's social security number on it, naturally we don't want to release that, and there's an exception for that. There are exceptions for various things, and so if we get a Public Information Act request and you have documents, not everything in those documents will necessarily go out, but if you get tapped to say, from someone who says, we have an open records request and we need this, that, and the other from you, you can have some security in providing it, knowing that we will protect anything that we can protect. You'll even notice that when you see the public comments that come in on the rules, the email addresses of people are blacked out so that that remains confidential, because we just we want to limit sharing anything that shouldn't be shared. So if someone asks you for, your notes from this meeting or a copy of the rule or something like that, that is not a Public Information Act request per se, because it's not written. It has to be written. And so if someone asks you for documents, you can direct them to our open records team that handles those those requests, and they can have them put that in a written form and submit it. We have a system just for that online, so people can submit requests there, but they may direct it at you. They may write to you, call you, message you, and ask for documents that they feel are public and that you should be able to give them. Well, it's not your job to make that decision, and you don't want to make that decision. You really want to, turn them over to our open records team so that it can be done in the formal process. We have a deadline that we have to meet, so you need to let us know ASAP if you get any kind of a request for records or documents. And like I said, there are various things that we don't let out, and it may very well be that a person already knows some of the information, but as a government agency, we cannot release that. And a person can get their own records, but they cannot get this confidential information on other people. And again, lots of resources for the Public Information Act. If you hear anything about it, it'll usually be from someone on our open records team who is letting you know that there's a request and we think you have information responsive to that request. So we would need to get it and then try to protect whatever can be protected. And a lot of things that you think, oh, this is not confidential. There's nothing in here that's private. But there are a lot of documents that an agency uses that actually are that reveal the thought processes or information about the agency. Like and a good example is draft rules. Draft rules, we don't have to release until we're going to propose them and they're going to be published, which of course then they're public. But drafts of the rules reflect, the agency's thoughts on things, your thoughts on things, and so we can protect those. So you'd be surprised at the things we can protect and the reasons why, but you really don't want to have to get mired in this. So your best bet is just to contact our open records people. And, if you aren't sure who to contact, you can always let Delia or Anna know, or anyone here can help you, direct you to those people who handle the requests. And so that is my open records training presentation, and we're going to be moving on to other items, and you'll see me again when we talk about the proposed rule changes, but you have lots of riveting presentations before that. So I will hand it off to the next person. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. They're very educational, and thank you for sharing the resources. That's very important, not just for the new committee members, but even for the longstanding members who may or may not have been able to look at those. So,
right, and they're in the packets too. Yeah.
Again, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to item D on the agenda, the approval of the minutes from the meeting back in November 3rd, 2020. I'd like to ask the committee members at this time if you have any comments regarding the minutes of November 3rd, 2020. If there are no comments, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the minutes for November 3rd as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve. This is Cindy Rothermel.
Thank you. And do I have a
Seconding.
second?
I'm sorry, who was that?
Devaney, seconding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and do a roll call vote for you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cynthia Rothermel,
Yes.
Laura Donahue,
Yes.
Christina Stevens,
Yes.
Dr. Valerie Devaney,
Yes.
Vanessa Gagne,
Aye.
Dr. Aaron Schultz,
Yes.
Amber Green, Miss Green. I think she may have logged off. I know she had that personal matter to deal with. And presiding officer Joseph Levine.
Yes.
The motion passes, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Clark.
Yes,
The
sir.
next item on the agenda, item E, is the public comment. And excuse me, as you may know, any person wishing to address the committee must submit an email by following the public comment instructions found on the last page of the agenda or located on the TDLR website. Emails must have been submitted to the committee by 12 o'clock noon, Thursday, August 31st. And so the Licensed Breeder Advisory Committee received 10 written comments, which were given to the committee beforehand, and has two people, Randall Turner and Jacob Hupp, who wish to speak under the public comments. They'll have 3 minutes to give their public comment. The committee will not be allowed to ask questions or discuss anything said. So, Mr. Turner, thank you for being here. So when you begin speaking, state your name and who you represent. You have 3 minutes to speak. And please understand that the committee members are not allowed to ask any questions or engage in a discussion with you about anything that is not specific on the agenda. Do you understand these instructions, sir?
Yes, I do.
Very well. You have 3 minutes, and please start when ready.
Thank you. Members of the committee, my name is Randy Turner. I practice animal law in Fort Worth, Texas. I was a strong supporter of Senate Bill 876 when it was heard in the legislature. I'm here today to talk about the proposed rules to this statute. Let me start out by saying during my career in animal law, I receive dozens of complaints each year from people who've bought pet animals, usually dogs, from breeders. And these dogs turned out to be either dying or sick or had some kind of terrible problem. And the dog purchaser wanted to make a claim against the breeder. So um, I get lots and lots of these, but I have to tell you that I have never received a complaint against a breeder who was licensed. All of these complaints for sick, diseased, and dying animals have been against unlicensed breeders. So I want to say that the TDLR rules are really working as far as protecting consumers and for animal welfare. My concern is that under the statute, there's a risk of hobby breeders, or excuse me, there's a risk of breeders masquerading as hobby breeders. As you know, the statute says there's an exemption, and the rules don't apply to someone who's competing in breed or conformation shows. Well, this leaves a huge loophole for people, and let me say, lawyers are trained to find loopholes and to exploit loopholes. And I can tell you right now, my biggest fear is that what's going to happen is somebody with 200 dogs that they're breeding in a shed in the backyard is going to get 2 dogs to breed them for conformation shows. Well, now then they're going to claim that they're exempt. They don't have to be licensed because they're breeding for conformation shows. So I implore the committee to recommend rules that don't allow this loophole. This would be catastrophic in my view, based on my experience representing people who've bought animals from unlicensed breeders. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. I'd like to introduce Mr. Hupp. Thank you for being here. When you begin speaking, please state your name and who you are, who you represent. You have 3 minutes to speak, and please understand that the committee members are not allowed to ask any questions or engage in a discussion with you about anything that is not specific on the agenda. Do you understand these instructions?
Yes.
Very good. You have
Thank
3
you.
minutes. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
You have 3 minutes, and please start when ready.
Thank you. Dear committee members, my name is Jacob Hupp, and I'm here on behalf of the American Kennel Club. For nearly 140 years, AKC has been dedicated to canine health and welfare. AKC, along with our more than 300 clubs in Texas, are here to raise concerns related to compliance, enforcement, and administration of the licensed breeder program as a result of the enactment of Senate Bill 876. As previously shared with the full commission, AKC requests an opportunity to work with the Licensed Breeder Advisory Committee to update existing regulations and to clarify who the law applies to. At this time, it is unclear how the law will be applied, and AKC is unable to appropriately educate dog breeders and owners in the state on who must comply with the law. In recent discussions with AKC, Governor Abbott's senior staff indicated their belief that the law should only apply to those that are actively breeding 5 intact female dogs. Additionally, the governor's staff indicated their belief that our concerns should be cleared up through the regulatory process. AKC agrees with the governor's staff that the law should be interpreted to regulate those who actively breed 5 or more intact females per license year. AKC fears the new definition will be interpreted to regulate anyone that owns 5 intact female dogs, breeds 1 dog, and sells as few as 1 puppy. If the law is interpreted in this way, these small-scale breeders will struggle to comply with the existing regulations that were intended to regulate commercial facilities. Additionally, AKC believes if the law is interpreted in this way, it will exponentially increase the regulated class and the costs of administering the licensed breeder program, and will result in significant enforcement issues for TDLR. Our experience has demonstrated that prospective puppy buyers are increasingly seeking to purchase dogs bred and socialized in a home environment. If our concerns are not addressed in regulation, consumer access to puppies bred in a home environment may be severely limited. Laws and regulations that target and alienate responsible small-scale breeders are not in the best interest of canine welfare or consumers. AKC is also concerned with how the new breeder confirmation shows exemption will be interpreted. The Act classifies 6-month-old puppies as adults, but dogs generally can't be exhibited in AKC confirmation shows until they are 6 months of age, and many aren't exhibited until they are much older. If evidence of confirmation show participation is required to qualify for the exemption, there is significant risk that those who should qualify would not be able to do so. In closing, AKC welcomes the opportunity to work with the Licensed Breeder Advisory Committee to ensure Texas breeders are given a fair opportunity to comply with the law, so that Texas consumers have continued access to healthy, well-bred puppies. We also request that the vacancies on the Licensed Breeder Advisory Committee be filled as soon as practical, so that expert breeders are appropriately represented should there be new policy recommendations in the coming months. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Hupp. Excuse me. All right, let's move on to the item F on the agenda, staff reports. And the first staff report will be presented by Laura Hernandez, the licensing manager in the licensing division. Ms. Hernandez?
Hi, good morning, board members. Yes, my name is Laura Hernandez, the manager on the licensing team. The breeder program was moved to my team back in October of this year, and so we're excited to learn more about this program and get the licenses issued as quickly as possible. My report today contains the statistics for fiscal year 2022 and then the first 3 quarters of 2023. We're finishing that last quarter, so at the next meeting we'll be able to provide full statistics for the entire fiscal year 2023. There's no online applications or renewals, and that's why that not applicable is indicated on the report. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Do we have, sorry, this is Devaney. Do we have any idea of the average number of dogs or cats per licensee?
We don't have that number captured. We do ask for the number at renewal. So those numbers are there, and whether we can get that in a report to you, I can definitely find out and see if that's something that we could provide on a report when we provide some statistics.
Mr. Levine, you're muted, sir.
I just said, I apologize. I didn't see the hand raised there. My fault. Any other questions for Ms. Hernandez? And we'll move on to item 2 in the staff reports, the customer service division. I'd like to call on Claudia Enriquez, the customer service manager. Ms. Claudia?
Hi, good morning, advisory board members. My name is Claudia Enriquez, and I am the manager for this program. As you can see from our statistics reports, it shows that contacts peaked in the month of March with a total contacts of 67 for the program. In the fiscal year report for 2022, contacts peaked in the month of February with 89 total contacts, 78 total contacts. Compared to fiscal year 2022, fiscal year 2023 does show a slight increase of contacts. But other than those statistics, I can answer any questions that you may have.
Well, if there are no questions, then we will move on to item 3 in the staff reports, the enforcement division. And I'd like to call on Aaron Heath, prosecutor. Mr. Heath?
Hi, my name is Aaron Heath, and I'm a prosecutor with the Enforcement Division. Here is the Enforcement Staff Report, which highlights key statistics for the Enforcement Division and a couple of case highlights. I wanted to point out that the department has collected all of the penalties for the 2 cases included in the case highlights. And please let me know if you have any questions or comments.
Just going to pause for a minute while we look through the attachment that we're scrolling through
Absolutely.
now.
Mr. Levine, these are also in y'all's packet that I sent out last week. So if y'all have any questions regarding that after the meeting, please feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Let's move on to item 4 then.
All right, thank you.
The Compliance Division. I'd like to call on Chris Russey, the Building and Mechanical Manager. Mr. Russey.
All right, good morning, Chairman and board members. My name is Chris Russey. I'm the Compliance Section Manager here at TDLR's Compliance Division for Consumer Protection Programs. We've had a couple of personnel updates since the last meeting of the board back in September 2020. First one being Russ Foley. He was previously the program specialist assigned to this program. He's retired and Latasha Pullman took over.
OH anxiety, the stress of not knowing who to trust.
Pardon me, Mr. Russey.
But a traveling instant
Pardon me
oil
one second.
change,
Ms.
you can
Clark,
watch us work
is there
without ever
anything we
leaving
can
your
do
car.
for his
Thanks for coming
microphone?
in. Have a great day.
There
Service
seems
you
to
can
be
see,
a lot
experts
of
you can
hollow
trust.
feedback, and some of the his words are getting hollowed out. And so, anything we can do there?
I'm not really hearing it on my end, but Chris, if you could log off and then log back in and we'll come back to your report.
Okay, certainly. Yeah, I'll log off and log back in.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. While we're waiting for Mr. Russey to log off and log back in, let's move to item 5, the Field Inspections Division. And I'd like to call on Fernando Reyes, the South Region Manager. Mr. Reyes?
Good morning, advisory board members. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Good. So my name is Fernando Reyes. I'm the South Region Manager for Field Inspections Division, and I'll be providing you this morning's report for our division. As you can see, statistics, we have our numbers for FY22 and FY23. We are in the last of Q4, August. Those are in published right now. So we don't have the finalized numbers yet of where we're at, but we are close to, extremely close to being on point with our inspections in that cycle. So if you have any questions about statistics.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Any questions for Mr. Reyes?
As we move on to current projects, my apologies. So currently we are assigned, myself and Inspector James McEachern are assigned to the bill implementation SB 876 team. And so we've been part of that team and trying to get that integrated into TLR. Also, it's been a minute since this group has met. So I look forward to meeting you all in person when that time is available for us. But since then, we've done some changes to our system. So we moved to an e-inspection system. And so now all of our programs, including Grader, is done through an e-inspections digital system where it's simply providing the licensee with a digital copy, filling it out on site, and then having that copy sent to our licensees of any issues that were found during that particular inspection. So we've been busy in field inspections implementing this new program. It was tasked by us by Sunset, and so I think we've done an excellent job implementing that program with our division. Outreach, currently myself and Inspector James McEachern will be attending the TACA annual conference in November. We've been asked to provide a Q&A portion of that conference. So we will be attending in person on site. That'll be in November. If there's any questions about my report this morning, I'd be happy to answer those.
This is Devaney. I have a question. Um, given that there are around 135 to 145 total licensees and you're getting around 125 inspections a year, is that 125 different licensees, or do we have a ballpark on how many of those are repeat inspections of the same licensee?
No, those are individually, so they're not repeat inspections. We do schedule those at an 18-month cycle, and so those are being sort of on task as they come out due from the last inspection.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Any other questions for Mr. Reyes?
This is Cindy Rothermel. Would it be possible to receive a copy of what your inspection form contains?
Yes, of course. I can get that out to you all.
Thank you.
Any others? All right, well, thank you, Mr. Reyes. Very informative. Appreciate your hard work, sir. Let's return back to Chris Russey, the Compliance Division. He's the Building and Mechanical Manager. And Mr. Russey.
All right, you heard me better now?
Much better, sir. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so we went over the personnel updates. We've had quite a few. The only other one was October 1st, 2022. I took over as the Consumer Protection Section Manager. The program previously managed by Stuart Sinnard, and he ended up leaving the agency. Otherwise, with outreach, we're constantly looking for outreach opportunities, especially when you have big statutory changes like just happened with this last session. Every year we go to the TACA event down in San Marcos, and we have a few other that we're scheduled to go to within the next year. But I really want to encourage those board members and anyone listening, especially with big changes like this, if there are any events coming up you would like us to attend and have some outreach opportunities, we are certainly welcome to do that. And for everyone out there that has access to materials, please just send an email to LaTasha Poland, and she'll get back with you. Be happy to go out to your. That's all I've got. I'm open to any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Russey? Okay, then let's move. Thank you, Mr. Russey. Let's move on then to the staff report for the Executive Office. I'd like to call on Jessica Escobar, the Chief of Staff. Counselor?
Thank you, Presiding Officer and members, for joining us this morning. My name is Jessica Escobar, Chief of Staff for TDLR. It's been a little while, as you've heard, since we last met with you all, since November 2020. We've had a few things going on since then. We've had the appointment of a couple of new commissioners. Commissioner Lori High and Commissioner Sujit Drakshram are both new commissioners to Texas Commission of Licensing and Regulation. We've also had a little bit of movement in our executive office. We have Brian Francis, our previous executive director, has retired. We have a new executive director, Mike Aris-Mendez. He's not a new face to TDLR. He was a previous commission member, chairman, and deputy executive director here at TDLR. And we had the retirement of one of our deputy executive director who had a long-standing career here at TDLR, David Gonzalez. Christina Kaiser, who has also been with TDLR, has been promoted to senior deputy executive director. We have also completed 2 legislative sessions since the last time you met. During the 87th session, we went through sunset, and basically that's a time for the legislature to look at our operations, see what we do, see how things are going. Our agency was continued for 12 more years, so this was a great success for us. We were very proud of it, and that was one of the biggest things that came out of the 87th legislative session. We were still working to implement some of those things because there were some very big lifts that came out of that House Bill 1560, which was part of this session. We just came out of legislative session again this year. We finished the 88th legislative session in May. We talked about this during the meeting. Laura referred to the fact that we're implementing rules and bills right now, which will lead to you all proposing and adopting rules. So we're in the heat of that. We're in the process of bill implementation season. So we monitor bills throughout the year or throughout the session. You'll see that on our website. We link to them. We let you know what we're watching. They may affect your program, or they may be broad and talk about rulemaking, information security, a variety of issues. Well, now is the time when those bills that have passed, it's time for us to evaluate and put them into place. So we currently have nearly 30 bill implementation teams. We're working on those ranging from items, new programs, but also things like rulemaking, procurement, and in your case, implementing the bills that affect the breeder program. We're also, our other big accomplishment coming out of legislative session was the appropriation of funds for a new licensing system. We were appropriated $32.9 million for a new licensing system. What this means for you all is that we will have a more efficient, streamlined, and convenient system for all of our licensees. So for licensees that may be applying for renewals or applications or doing a lot of things online, they will no longer have to do that, where right now we have multiple licensing systems. This will make things a lot easier for our staff to get everything in one concise place. It'll make it easier to where our licensees will be able to find things online. So we are actively working in that process right now to begin the acquisition of that. And it's going to take us a couple of years, but we're very excited for how it'll benefit everyone. The last thing I have for you is that we do have one pending vacancy on the board. We are in the process of bringing that to the commission in the October 10th meeting. Once they receive it, they're going to review it, and we anticipate that they will be appointing that member during that meeting, and then you'll have a full board. So that's all I have for you. It's a quick and concise update, so if you all have any questions for me, just let me know. All right. Thank you guys for your service. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Escobar. So let's move on to item G of today's agenda. And the item G is the discussion and possible recommendation on the proposed amendments to the existing rules of the 16th Texas Administrative Code, proposed new rules, and proposed repeal of existing rules regarding the licensed breeder program. The proposed amendments implement Senate Bill 876, which amended Occupations Code Chapter 802 to expand the licensing requirement to more dog or cat breeders and to expand exemptions from licensing. The amendments add a license fee for breeders newly subject to licensing, make minor changes to license holder responsibilities, and make editorial changes to update, correct, and clarify the rules. I'd like to call on Laura Pfefferly, the Assistant General Counsel at this time.
Hi, this is Laura Pfefferly again, Assistant General Counsel, and I'm going to share my screen with you. And the first thing I wanted to show you is, in fact, not the rules, but the statute, because I want to show you what changed in the statute if you haven't had a chance to review that. This is the actual Occupations Code, Chapter 802, which is, of course, the dog and cat breeder statute. And this is the first change that was made by the bill, SB 876. It changed the definition of the dog or cat breeder. So they've changed it to a person who possesses 5 or more adult intact female animals and is engaged in the business of breeding those animals for direct or indirect sale or for exchange in return for consideration. And you'll see there's no minimum number sold per year. This is, the wording that the legislature has put into the statute. There's not anything that the agency can do to change that wording, except the next session, the legislature could change it again if they wanted to. But this is what we have for the next 2 years, at least. And so the other change is in the exemptions. And the exemptions are for dogs. They are not for cats. So these exemptions only apply to dog breeds and not cat breeds. So the third exemption there, it's still the same exemption, competing in field trials, hunting tests, but they've added the breed or conformation shows And so that becomes an exemption that applies to dogs. And they have to be, you have to look at every word. They have to be competing in the breed or conformation shows. And this, you can see in A at the very top there, the exemption, it says this section applies only to a dog bred with the intent that it be used primarily for, and then it gives you these various things. That means it says a dog. It doesn't mean all of your dogs. It means a. So that means that we look at this on a dog by dog basis. If you have 50 dogs and you only show one of them, the other 49 are not exempt unless they fall under some other exemption. So it's looked at on, which dogs are you actually, putting in these competitions. And then the other change here to the statute was this chapter doesn't apply to a person to the extent the person breeds the dogs described by A, which is all of these exemptions, for a use described by subsection A. Now, it used to say personal there, and this was, I'm told, an exemption that was for people who, sort of like breed generations of dogs for their own hunting use, that sort of thing. They're not really in the business of selling dogs. They might sell off a few excess puppies, but they're kind of, breeding for their own farm or hunting activities. That word personal is gone now. So the chapter doesn't apply if you're doing those activities in A and you're selling, you're in the business of selling. The personal part of it is gone. So those uses are exempt uses of the dogs. So if you're, breeding with the intent that it be used primarily for herding, hunting, competing in, the field trials or the conformation shows, whatever it is, competitions, that those exemptions will apply. And so while the legislature took away in the beginning of the statute by saying that, if you have 5 or more, you're going to be regulated now instead of just 11 or more, and then it gives you more exemptions. So those are expanded. And again, this is the legislature doing this. It's not us. We have to implement this, but this is what the people in the white building across the street did. So this is, the actual change in the law. So now we're going to go on to the rules that we're proposing. And so I'm going to stop sharing this and put the rules up. Oh, I think I've got the same thing up there. Wait a minute.
Laura, did you need any assistance?
I am attempting to get the rules up there, and I think I'm there. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so you have a copy of the red line, we call it. That's the actual version of the rules that we submit to the Texas Register. The Texas Register doesn't want to see the whole set of rules. They just want to see the changes, and there's a little bit of context in there. Some of the pieces of the rule section that changed are reproduced so that they can orient themselves as to what is changing, but it doesn't have the full set. The document I'm showing you is the full set of rules with the changes marked. So it's longer than the one you have in your packets, but it also shows you the changes in context. So I wanted to explain that because, we're not going to go through this line by line, but you're going to see that this looks different than the one in your package, but it's all the same changes. It's just that my version that I'm showing you has everything that isn't changing as well, so you can see it in context. But if you have a question about any of it, it's all going to be the same changes that are in your packet. So you're going to see a bunch of yellow and bolding, and those are just things that are changing. Whether or not they're significant is another thing. And I'm not going to go through every single one of them because you really don't want me to go through every number that changed in a list. I'm only going to go with the real substantive changes that we're making to implement the bill. Some of the changes, in fact, probably I'd say most of them, 90% of them are cleanup, clarification, maybe moving something from another section. There's not a whole lot of that, but there was a lot of cleaning up and clarifying that needed to be done. And so I felt like, well, we might as well get them cleaned up, even though it's not changing the meaning. Like an example is this very first provision in the definitions here. A word or term not defined here is going to be what it says in the CFR. That was just in another section, and I moved it here because it makes more sense here. The definition of the act, that's just a term that I'm using in the rules, the act, instead of having to say Texas Occupations Code Chapter 802 every time. So it's that, that definition is just a kind of a shortcut for us to refer to it as the act. So I'm not going to talk about ones like that unless, you see it and you're like, what is that? So we'll talk about it if you ask me about it. Otherwise, I'm just going to go through the more substantive things that are changing to implement the bill. And let's see. Well, the first one here, we've changed in the dog or cat breeder definition. We've just changed it from 11 to 5. And we're taking out this part that the legislature took out of the statute because this language really tracks the statute language. We're not recreating the wheel here. We just took out the part about selling 20 animals a year because the legislature took that out. So that's going away. We added licensee to just shorten up the text in the rules to refer to a person as a licensee who's a breeder, and the representative. A lot of times the actual licensee is not the person that we're dealing with, on inspections and that. So it's more likely to be a kennel manager or someone like that. So we are defining a representative. And let's see, I guess you'd say this is a substantive change, but it's really just saying that if you possess 5 or more and you're engaged in the business of breeding, then you need to, be licensed as a dog or a cat breeder. So it didn't actually clearly state that, so that's clearly stated, but that's nothing new. The number is new, but you always did require a license if you met the criteria for a breeder. And then this language came right from the bill, and in your packets, this language that's lined out here is actually in your packets because we didn't take out this phrase until after we had the packets made up. But if you recommend to propose these rules today, they will not have that notwithstanding Section 802 part of the sentence there in them. What you're seeing is what you would be voting on to approve, other than if you make any changes. If you see an error or there's something you want to change, we can still change that for publication because, once the rules are published, then we're in the comment period, but we can make changes if we need to. Now, they have been approved by the governor's office at this point. So if you make like a really significant change, we'd have to get governor's office approval again. But if it's just wording or an error or something, we can fix that. this is, the governor's office has already okayed that we'll take out that phrase. It just happens to still be in your packet, but that phrase will be gone, and it'll just, the sentence is just going to start with, a dog or cat breeder who possesses 5 or more, and et cetera. So, all this sentence is saying is that the license, you need to have the license for January 1st. That's when the requirement actually begins, and the rules are going to be effective just, right on time for the effective date of the license requirement. So, that's one of the reasons why we're trying to speed these rules through, so that we can get them published and get through the comment period and get them effective in time for this deadline for when the new people need to be licensed. And so this section really is not any substantive changes. This is really just cleanup of how the license requirements are worded. The rules do add a fee. We'll get to that later. But these are all things that basically are cleanup. Nothing to really worry about. If you have a question, just let me know. Again, lots of cleanup, just trying to bring the language up to date. These rules haven't been amended in a good while. And so we're kind of trying to standardize our rules and use sort of the same conventions for, phrasing things. You'll notice that we took out registration. There is no registration in our rules. So we issue the dog or cat breeder license, but there are no registrations. So we just took out registration wherever it appeared. And let's see. Okay, so here we come to the exemption section, and this is where the substantive change was made in the statute, and so it's in the rule. This language tracks the statute language, and so you won't see a difference here. You're going to see that this looks exactly like the statute, because it is. This exemptions language really does track the statute. The difference is that we have to interpret this to apply it to enforce the rules and get compliance and do enforcement actions. So the wording is the same. The interpretation is where the rules come in, and the your input. So nothing new there. That's just the new statutory language. And let's see. This is, I guess you might say, it's a substantive change in the rule, but really it's just saying that if you get an inspection and our people tell you, well, you need to fix this or you need to fix that, if they tell you how you can fix it, they're recommending a way to get into compliance, but you don't have to do it the way they recommend. If a cage is too short and they say, well, you need to get a bigger cage, well, you can modify that cage to make it taller if that's how you want to do it, instead of getting a new one. So we're just saying, if you if you take an action to correct a violation, that is your choice, how you do it. You just need to come into compliance. So and you don't need to have a second inspection. And this is something that field inspections has said is not necessary. You can provide photographs or other evidence that satisfies the inspector that you have corrected something either your way or the way they recommended, but that it's fixed. That's always been true. It's just it's nice to have it in the rule saying that. More cleanup. And some of this is like in G here. The inspection report is going to identify the violations, and we're saying that it may recommend the corrective actions, because in some cases it may not. It may tell you what your violation is, but it may not recommend a corrective action. Part of that is coming from the new e-inspections process, where there may not be a field in that electronic form that says, how to fix something. Now, the person on site doing an inspection or doing an e-inspection may tell you that, but it may not actually be in writing in the inspection report. The violation or the problem always will be, but the solution may not be. And of course, you can always ask, what is the solution if you're really not sure how to come into compliance? That's no problem. And again, they may give you a list of, how to take care of compliance problems. They may or may not be able to do that. It'll be conveyed to you if you ask, and sometimes it'll be conveyed to you spontaneously, but it may not be in writing on every piece of paper you see. And again, you're not obligated to do the correction that is recommended to come into compliance. You can come into compliance any way you like to. If there's a problem, you can fix it a different way. You can take a different approach. You can give up your license and quit the business. It's really up to you how you want to comply. We just tend to recommend the simplest, easiest way for you to comply. Let's see. This is just adding a few things that we've been putting into pretty much all the rule sets that we have. We've got 40-something programs, and we're trying to put these provisions in. And the first one there is just complaint procedures, where to find those. And if this C here is saying a qualified person may assist the department in an investigation. Oftentimes that means one of the board members. If you help with some professional opinions about how an operation is being run, for example, and in an enforcement case, you are not, you're immune from liability for participating in that case and advising about it. So, because we want to encourage the board members to be our experts when that's possible to do, because the business, and sometimes we need an expert to say, yes, the dog must have water every day, or whatever it is. So you're immune, and we're, like I say, we're putting these in all the rules. And those, things are in statute as well. So it's not that you're the only people getting those things. Those are true in the law for all the programs. Let's see. Okay. The advisory committee material is all yellow here. The issue here is that we just reorganized it and renumbered it, but it's all the same substance as it was before. You're still 9 members, still have to be breeders, veterinarians, public. None of that has changed. It's just all renumbered and put into a sort of a consistent looking section with other sets of rules about advisory boards and committees. So nothing to get worried about there. Nothing is changing. The old language is just being repealed, and then we just put it all as new language, but it's all the same requirements. So nothing to worry about. And this is cleanup. Let's see. This is allowing for a printed or an electronic copy of the license to be displayed. It really isn't a change. It's just rewording what was there. It was just kind of clumsily worded, but that was already something you had to do, is to have a copy on display. And the law and the rules, that's another thing that we're not changing the substantive requirement. It's just saying, you can have these in more than one format. You don't have to have a hard copy. It can be electronic. So that the law, rules, and the license still have the obligation to have those there. This is just paring language out that didn't need to be there, clean up. And this, again, cleanup, we've been adding this kind of phrase that things have to be done in a manner approved or prescribed by the department, because a lot of our rules used to say on a form. Well, we've gotten away from forms so much and gone online that there oftentimes isn't a form for what you're doing. So you'll see that language, but it's just opening the door to however you have to do this action. You can do it on paper, electronically, however it is. Nothing to be concerned about. This change here is taking out the word separate, and this comes from the Federal Code of Federal Regulations, the CFR, which you probably know the statute.
For
tells us
116
that
years, we've
the
helped millions
federal,
of businesses move
rules
relentlessly
on,
forward, fueling millions of go-getters,
dog
dream
and cat
chasers, and
breeders
trailblazers,
are the
giving millions of reasons
we
why
have to
we're the most
regulate
trusted
at
shipping
least
company
as
in America.
stringently as those rules are written. There are two other aspects of that. One is the statute itself. Our breeder statute is more stringent than the federal rules in some cases. Now, the federal rules have changed since the last time this program had actual rulemaking. We had the rule review, but like I said, nothing really changes in rule review. It's in a regular rulemaking like this one where things can actually change. And even though there have been changes in the federal rules, those have not been put into our rules yet, but they do need to be. And so in examining the federal rules, there are a number of changes that need to come into these rules. And so, our perspective is we're going to need to start another rulemaking to get those in, because they do need to be in there. But one thing that's in the federal rules is that if you keep your animals in a group, that you can keep their records as a group record. You still have to have the individual animals accounted for. Like if it's shots records, it's got to say which animals got the shots, but you can have this group record. So we went ahead and put that into these rules, that you can actually have, instead of a separate record for each animal, if they're in a group, you can do the group record. That's consistent with the federal rules that are going to be coming in, so we don't have a concern about that. We did feel like that since there are going to be some new licensees who have 5 or more females, that it might be helpful for them to just start out with the group record instead of the individual records. And so we felt like we should go ahead and make that part of the rules now, so that they can start off that way instead of having to change later. And so this is also language about that federal change, just basically saying that you can do this group record for the animals that are in a group. Naturally, if they have a medical procedure, you may want to have separate records. But if you're like in an electronic database, there really is no physical separate record. It's all data that's in a database or scans. So, what it actually means to you is dependent on how you keep your records. But it's basically just saying you can have these group records, but you can also have medical records for each animal that are separate or separately maintained. And you need to track their shots maybe in the group record and medical procedures in their medical records, but to you they may be all the same thing. It's just opening that up to be a little more flexible on your record keeping. You still have to keep those records. It's just letting you have some choices about how that's going to be kept. And of course, if you would sell the animal, you'd need to provide copies of the group and the individual records according to what the rules require you to produce. So that I guess you'd say is a substantive change, but it really just gives you more flexibility. So it's not anything to be concerned about. And if you don't keep group records, it doesn't mean anything to you anyway. And here is where we've added the fee. We just left the other categories as they were, same fee, same numbers of animals, and added the 5 to 10, which are the new people that need to be licensed, as if you have 5 to 10 and you're in the business of breeding them for sale. And the fee is $150, and the renewal is $150, and that is just based on we basically have overhead to run the program, and so the fees are to cover our expense of regulating, and we don't anticipate a huge number of new licensees, but we really don't have a good idea how many there will be. But we felt like the $150 fee was manageable and appropriate. This is cleanup here, nothing to be worried about. More cleanup. This is that sentence that you saw up in the definitions. This is where it was. That's why it's lined out here. I just moved that up into the definitions because it just made more sense up there instead of under housing. And now this is where we're getting into the actual housing and those type of requirements. And you'll see there's not a lot of yellow in there because we're not changing those yet. And I say yet because we do need to do another rulemaking to get the federal changes in here. And those federal minimums are not something that we can ignore. They're not in the rules yet, but they will be making the rules look different. And those are things that we will need to talk about, and what the changes are and how to implement them and when. But for now, you really don't have substantive changes except for that allowing the group records. But other than that, there's not any substantive change here. It's just, this is all cleanup, just terminology, making it more clear what's being said, but and nothing really changing. Rewording here, but just clean up. If you looked at this, if you've looked at your red line, all of these changes, like I said, are in the red line. It's just you don't see all of this text, but these are, the federal standards, and that's mainly what's in there, but also from the statute. You can't disregard that the statute does have some specific requirements on how the animals are housed and handled. So let's see if there's anything else. And ask me any questions if you if you want to. That's the end of the rules there. Again, like I said, about 99% of this is the cleanup, and the substantive changes I've showed you are from the statute, and just that one thing from the federal rules about the group records. And so you may be wondering why there aren't more changes. Well, I acknowledge there are a lot of changes that need to be made. The problem here is that we have got to get these rules adopted in time for the new licensing requirement. So you can see that there isn't a whole lot to change here, because it's either cleanup and it isn't changing the substance of the rules. It hasn't changed the requirement. It just cleans it up and clarifies it. Or it's coming from the law, what changed in the law, which none of us can change, only the legislature can. So that is what we are doing in this rule change, is implementing the statute change and doing some cleanup. So your decision today is going to be whether you see some changes you want to make in here or not. If you don't see any, there's still another chance to do that. If you approve these to go forward as written here with that one phrase that I showed you that was lined out, that's been lined out in the official version. If you approve these to go forward, what happens next is they are published for the comment period. And so in the comment period, we hear from the public. We already have comments from several people for this meeting, and then the comment period that begins when the rules are published is 30 days, and so we'll have all of those comments. People can also comment at the next advisory board meeting where these rules would be, recommended for adoption. At this meeting, the main thing is just to, approve them and recommend that they be published. The next meeting is where you get the chance to look at all the comments, consider them. We have to respond to those comments. If we make changes in the rules responding to the comments, then that is something we handle at the second meeting. We agree on what, if anything, we're going to change from what's proposed. You may decide you don't want to change anything and adopt them exactly the way they are, but usually there is something that, some error someone finds or something that could be said better, and we can make, changes like that. We can't make huge changes at adoption because, again, we come back to the public notice. If the public hasn't had notice of a change, they haven't had a chance to comment on it. The publication of these rules is the notice to the public of what we are doing to the rules. And so we can't at adoption, at your next meeting, make a bunch of changes and then recommend that they be adopted with all those changes that the public hasn't had a chance to look at and review and comment on. So that's why I'm saying at adoption, we can do some tweaks, but we cannot, make lots of huge changes. So in these rules, there are a limited number of changes being made right now. And then at adoption, chances are these rules are just going to be adopted pretty much the way they are now, maybe a few minor tweaks. But then we are planning and expecting for there to be that substantive rulemaking following this one, where we get the federal regulations in, where we get a lot of input from breeders, the public, and any stakeholder about how those things are going to be put into the rules, what those rules are going to say, how are we going to decide what is an animal bred for conformation shows. All of those tricky questions are the things that we're going to have to address in that next rulemaking. If we try to address it in this one, we will never make the deadline to get these adopted for the new licensing. And so that's why you see sort of a bare minimum of change here. This is to get the new law implemented. The next rulemaking will be to get the rules caught up with all the changes that in our law, the federal Code of Federal Regulations, and anything else that we need to get in there. So I won't just keep going on, but if you have any questions, please ask me. Like I said, we can change things right now. They haven't been published yet. Once they're published, then it becomes a lot harder to make changes, especially meaningful changes, not just cleanup. And as I said, this sentence you're looking at here, this notwithstanding, that is not going to be in the published rules. It'll just start there with a dog or cat breeder. So I'll stop. If you have any questions, let me know. If not, you'll be voting to approve these for publication or not. Hopefully you will be wanting to approve them for publication because we really need to get these published and get that comment period started because we really are on a deadline. So thank you for listening, and please let me have any questions and I'll stop sharing.
My question is for Miss Anna Clark. So the committee will be voting today to approve the changes, and will you handle that roll call vote?
Yes, so the committee will be voting to publish these to the Texas Register. That will give the public 30 days to look over it and give us any comments that they have on the proposed changes. And then we'll meet again as an advisory committee, and that is when you will vote to either accept or to not accept the proposed changes to the rules. But yes, I'll handle the roll call vote.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And when will you do that?
We need a motion and a second before I can do the roll call vote.
Okay, shall I do that now?
Yes, you can request for someone to make a motion. Yes, sir.
So then I officially request a motion for the vote for these changes to be implemented. Do I have a motion? For the
Laura
vote?
Donahue, make the motion.
And do I have a second?
I second.
Who was that? I'm sorry.
Christina.
Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead and do the roll call vote. Cynthia Rothermel,
I accept.
Laura Donahue,
Yes.
Christina Stevens,
Yes.
Dr. Valerie Devaney,
Yes.
Vanessa Gagne,
Aye.
Dr. Aaron Schultz.
Yes.
Ms. Green did have to leave, so we're skipping her, and presiding officer Joseph Levine.
Yes.
The motion passes, sir.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Council Pfefferly, for that amazing recap.
And if you have questions, feel free to, contact us, anytime during the comment period. And you all can comment as well. There's nothing to stop you from commenting. So if you want to add, or you think of something that we missed, go ahead and comment and it'll be addressed with the others.
Yeah, I'd actually recommend that to the committee members because as experts in our field, in our individual fields, our input could be very valuable to the changes. So
yeah, and it may not affect this set of rules, but that following set that we need to do, that's where we're going to need a lot of input. So.
And this is Cindy Rothermel. Can we get those federal rules in advance?
Yeah, they're actually online. If you just Google the Electronic Code of Federal Regulations, I can tell you exactly where they are. You just go to, let's see. It's Title IX, which is called Animals and Animal Products. Chapter 1 is the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, or APHIS. You've probably heard of them. Subchapter A is animal welfare. And then, like I say, Title IX, Animals and Animal Products, Chapter 1, Subchapter A, Animal Welfare. And then you'll see there that it's got subparts. And the Subpart A is licensing, let's see, well, Part 2, Subpart A. They have all of these subdivisions, but when you get on there, you will see Subpart A, and then you'll see 3.1, 3.2, and so on, down to basically 3.19. Those are all the federal standards that are in the rules now, but those have been updated. And so those are the ones that we're going to be looking at to work those into our rules. And, like I had said, the federal rules are, the federal standards are our floor. That's our minimum. And so we have to put those in. You'll see that our rules are sometimes a little more stringent than the federal because, like I said, the statute actually has substantive requirements on this, and some of those are actually more stringent than the federal. But if you go to that CFR and you look at that Chapter 1, Subchapter A, Part 3 standards, Subpart A, and then you look at 3.1 to 3.19, those are the applicable standards. And you'll recognize it. It's, housing, indoor housing, primary enclosure, all the things you're familiar with in our rules. That's where a lot of that comes from. And so if you look at that, you'll see the federal right the way it is up to date. It various pieces of it change all the time because the feds are always doing rulemaking too. So by the time we actually get these rules into our rules, there may be even more changes to them. But you'll see, like the group records, you'll see that in there. Because that was one thing that I felt like, it'd be great to have that now instead of later. but these other changes in there will be for that next rulemaking. So, I mean, you can make comments about what you think about all of that, but really, you can table it if you want to until we do that rulemaking, because I can't address it in this one. I can't make all these changes now. All we can do is what you've seen today. That's this rulemaking. Then the next one is getting all of that worked in.
And committee members, I can send y'all the link for that one after the meeting as well.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. And thank you, council.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move right along then to item H on the agenda for today, the discussion and possible appointment of work groups related to future rulemaking to incorporate updates in federal standards and other necessary changes to the rules. I'd like to reintroduce Laura Pfefferly, Assistant General Counsel.
Yeah, and I won't, give you another 20 minutes on all of this, but as I mentioned, we really do need to get your input for the new rules to come. And so at this point, we're in the middle of this rulemaking, but the next one we expect to start soon after this one's all concluded. If you want to start meeting as work groups, I strongly recommend doing that, because it takes time to just kind of look at everything, see how it's going to fall out when it's implemented, the things that we have to implement from the federal rules and our statute, and then and get input from the industry about how we're going to interpret and enforce the new changes. An example is, the breed and conformation competitions. How are we going to enforce that? What evidence are we going to need to see that a dog is being bred for that purpose, so that we know whether they're exempt? So those are the kinds of things that we want and need input on, and we want not just, our input. We want breeders, we want veterinarians, we want all the input we can get as to how to craft the rules so that they're workable, so that you can run your business, but we can also regulate, and we don't have to recreate the wheel every time we go out to a facility, and see what's there, and have to start from scratch on what we need to look for, what records we need to see, and that sort of thing. So I would recommend that you think about making it one or two work groups, maybe one for looking at the actual changes to the housing and maintenance of the facility, maybe one on the interpreting the regulations and the exemptions. It's kind of up to you, and I'm not sure which things each person on the board is interested in, but you can have work groups with as many members as you want that is less than a quorum. And so you can have 2, 3, 4, I believe. I think 5 is a quorum here. And so if you appoint those work groups, then our people will get in touch with you about, doing a meeting, and it would most likely be a virtual meeting just like this, where we can start talking about those changes. And, if you do a little reading on the federal regulations that have changed beforehand, that'll help you be up to speed. And was said, we have some outreach opportunities. We're going to be going to the Texas Animal Control Association and some other events to try to get the word out, and also to get input. But there's really no substitute for the board having these discussions and talking about the changes to making the rules. And we will have the rules with these changes already done, and that's where we'll be starting from to incorporate more changes. So I would recommend appointing those work groups, even if you don't start meeting right away, to get started on the process.
So Mr. Levine, you can either ask for volunteers, or you can simply appoint people to the board. Please note that we still have a breeder position open, and Ms. Green did have to sign off today. but you can appoint her for something as well.
Thank you. I appreciate the information there as well. At this point, I think that the best option would be to ask for volunteers. And let's perhaps start at least one work group so we can get some discussion going. And then we can perhaps start a second work group if needed from there. So do we have any volunteers for a work group to discuss what we've been talking about today?
Mr. Levine, this is Cindy Rothermel. I would very much like to be a part of a work group to look at how we're going to implement the exceptions.
Thank you.
And this is Devaney. I would also like to be on that work group. I am both a veterinarian and a breeder, as well as doing high volume spay neuter at shelters and working with people like Cindy and rescue groups.
So you have plenty of time to relax during your day.
Well, you know, the current litter of puppies is not keeping me busy at all. No.
No.
And this is Christina Stevens, and I would like to be a part of this work group too.
We have room for one more.
Yeah, I'd love to be on there.
Ms. Vanessa?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'll look to
Okay,
you,
so-
Anna Clark, to where to go from here.
So I will send out an email to everybody, letting everybody know who is on the work group. I'll also send out that link that Laura mentioned earlier, as well as the form that somebody requested for field inspections, that inspection form. Everything will go out this afternoon.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And thank you, committee members, for volunteering. I look forward to seeing the result of your interaction and in helping move this forward. So let's move along to the item I on the agenda, the recommendation for agenda items for our next meeting. So committee members, do you have any recommendations for the next meeting? Anyone
We
at
will
all?
have the proposed rules come back for after public comment. We'll have those for y'all to review. We may have a work group report depending on how soon the work group will meet. But if y'all do have any other agenda items, please feel free to reach out to me. Everybody has my personal cell phone number, my regular number, my email address. Y'all know how to get a hold of me. So please feel free to contact me with those as well.
It does
Any
sound
other-
like, oh, sorry.
Nope, I was just going to say, any other recommendations or comments?
Yeah, it does sound like we're going to need to put those federal regs up there and, make sure that we've got the implementation, like steps into adding those in. So I guess that would be a pretty big agenda item.
Okay.
Okay. So let's move to item J. Let's talk about the next meeting date. And Ms. Anna, it will probably be virtual, I'm guessing, or is it going to be physical?
Yes, sir. It will be a virtual meeting.
Okay. So do we have a recommendation for that meeting date?
I believe Laura is requesting us to meet on November 1st. Laura, is that the date that you requested?
Yes, the first, or close to that. If the first doesn't work for everyone, it just needs to be near that because we need to stay on our timeline to get these adopted. So, if everyone can check their calendars or knows if the first is available, we need a quorum. If you're not available, but the rest, the members are, that the main thing is to stay on our timeline.
So would everybody take a minute right now and look at your calendars, please?
The
And-
meeting will be at 10 o'clock as well.
Okay. And Ms. Anna, once they do, would you mind taking a roll call so we can just knock it right out?
Of course. Mr. Levine, are you okay with that date?
Yes.
Perfect. Cynthia Rothermel?
I am available.
Okay. Laura Donahue?
I am tentative. I may be traveling. I haven't nailed down my travel plans quite yet. I'll
Okay.
do my best.
Christina Stevens?
As of right now, yes.
Okay. Valerie Devaney?
I am currently scheduled to work, but I may be able to take a half day off in order to do the meeting.
Okay. Thank you for that. And Vanessa Gagne?
I'm available.
Okay. Dr. Schultz?
I am not, but I am available the 3rd. If everybody could do that day.
So we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 people tentative for November 5th. That is not a quorum, but if Dr. Devaney can take off 1, 2, 3, that would be 5.
If not,
I can do the 1st, but I cannot do the 3rd.
there we go. That's what I was looking
Okay.
for.
So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, we would have a quorum for November 1st.
Okay, so is everybody okay with booking that? November 1st, 10 a.m.? Let's go.
Thank you.
Let's go. Strangely enough, I'm actually looking forward to meeting in person again.
We have had a few people wish to meet, but there is some difficulty for those who are living, say, in Lubbock or El Paso, to fly here for a meeting, especially since they're not getting paid for their time or travel.
Right.
But yes, we're looking into having hybrid meetings. Yes, sir.
Awesome. Okay, well, since we've got that scheduled, then we'll move on to item K of the agenda, and that is the adjournment. And so I'll announce that the meeting is adjourned. And thank you for everyone who's attended. And the time right now is at 11:50 a.m. The meeting is adjourned.